and welcome to Nycos RPG. Tonight is a special episode for those of you that are fans of the show and are aware of what's going on. This is our Nycos Nightly News. We will be bringing the report directly from Throckmorton. His friends call him Thidwick, but his name is Throckmorton, and he will be bringing us the report momentarily. But before then, make sure you like and subscribe and hit all the buttons below. Now, this episode is going to be presented for our Patreon supporters and patrons. And so if you want to get this information early next week, make sure you go to the site and subscribe as a member. And whether you are a paid member or not, the access will be available to you with your paid membership, and therefore you can get the information a few days early. But the Nycos Nightly News reports are fundamentally a update on what's going on in all of our campaigns simultaneously. I can make sure I'm looking at the right camera. So, without any further ado, let's get started, shall we?
Absorbing damage is the name of the game. From the claws of monsters or the heat from a ball of flame, our strength in numbers is a roll of the dice.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Throckmorton P. Thidwhistle, your avid reporter on the scene with all the news that's prit to fit. I've got to keep saying that right. All right, but welcome. We are going to be covering the information of the Heralds of Change. For a quick reminder, let me show you the map we're dealing with. So we are dealing with, in this case, the group known as the Heralds of the Change, and they are on their way towards a location that is known as the Ascent into Hell and the Descent into Heaven. And it's said to be somewhere in this peninsula area of the Demon Scar. And so they are, on at this point, traversing that direction and moving into the... Whoop! Scratch that, reverse it. Ha! Take two. The Heralds of the Change are the group that are operating on Sundays, and they are working from the current city of Ulmara. They have been endeavoring to move north into this pass and are moving towards Bastion with the idea of supporting the current besieging that is going on, and therefore to hopefully break the back of the empire as it has now spread itself thinner and has a fundamentally flawed center that they were able to exploit. And so they were moving in this direction, and as they passed through the mountains, they came to the area known as the Red Mother. It is the largest mountain in the range and brought the furthest north edge of the Ulmara claims. And some call it the finger of fate, as the mountain juts high above the rest of the mountains in the range. And as they were traversing this mountain, we will get into what the story was. Let's go ahead and talk about the other location just so that we can catch up. Strangers in the Strange Land is the group that I was speaking of that is also in this particular area, but they are moving into an area that is more central to the isthmus here and are attempting to locate the aforementioned Descent into Heaven and Ascent into Hell location. So there is a mountain that is of that particular note somewhere also in this range, but they were not specifically engaged with the military and are therefore not combatants in that engagement. Finally, the Prism born are far afield from these, operating currently out of the village of Selk, far to the south, and endeavoring to make their way across the continents. And we'll go more into the details of their particular story as we get to them. But let's go ahead and move on to our current situation, as I said before.
is the name of the game. From the claws of monsters or the heat from a ball of flame, our strength in numbers is a roll of the dice.
Welcome back. This is your reporter Throckmorton P. Thidwhistle, continuing our coverage of the World at War here on Nycos. And we are in particular dealing with the first of our adventuring groups, which we pointed out are operating in the area near the Red Mother. This mountain is the most significant of the mountain range and signifies the northernmost reaches of the Olmaran claim to this valley. And as the saying goes, where there is fire, normally it's where there is smoke, but where there is fire, there is trouble. And what we are talking about is the Empire's forces have indirectly handed the Luthanin his first loss of the campaign. And there is more to the story than can be known, but fundamentally, as you may recall, in the last reports, there was a considerable forest fire established as a defensive move by the Luthanin, and having called that fire to its best capabilities at the time, the Imperator had deemed it necessary to turn his attentions from the now pacified Olmara and to begin to provide support to the beleaguered city of Bastion. We'll give more details as we go through the story, but this is a quite a tale to tell, and as the saying goes, where there is fire, there is dragon. All right, so the issue here is that the Empire had apparently been responsible for launching 3 recognized and identifiable dragons, manifesting the capacity for scintillation damage, which we talked about in the last report. This scintillation damage caused the death of beings that had been injured or even in close proximity to the beasts for hours, days, and even weeks thereafter. And this draconic force that had been originally eliminated, of course, as you may recall, damaged the fields for a considerable distance around itself and seemed to also still be devastatingly destructive a full week after its engagement. And so, in like fashion, the adventurers and the group in particular was leading the armies of the Empire, armies of the Luthanin north to support their allies in Bastion. And as luck would have it, the Skyblades Legion, the Skyblades portion of the Luthanin's legions, were too far spread out, and as misfortune would have it, failed to recognize the threat as it approached from behind them. And although they sold themselves dearly and eventually helped to assist in bringing down the beast, the entirety of the Skyblades portion of the Luthanin's army was lost. Additionally, there are reports that a small contingent of Koromite archers, those particularly supportive of the Korom government, yet operating outside of their permissions, had volunteered for the Luthanin forces, and they themselves were sacrificed in the destruction of the horrible beast. Now, this happened far up in the mountains, as I said, and the adventurers and the survivors of the conflict have now descended into the cradle of the Red Mother, which is the mountainous areas sheltered low point, and therefore are currently holed up there and attempting to, quote, lick their wounds and prepare to continue the march. The silver lining in all of this is that finally they have destroyed the second of the Imperator's major forces of this conflict so far. And though it did cost them dearly, it does reduce significantly the effectiveness of the Empire's ability to force military surrenders merely by producing their superior forces. So. As a credit to the Luthanen's forces, it has been made clear that there was not the loss of their airship, nor the crew and commander of that vessel, and so they do still have a singular air support unit, albeit far inferior for taking on, it's believed, the third of these draconic beasts. Now, it is interesting to note that because this defeat of the Luthanen occurred at the hands of a singular beast, officially there is no such report filed with the Empire, and therefore the records will still show that the Empire has 2 losses and the Luthanen now has 1, even though the establishment would argue that the Empire did not actually visit this defeat. So there'll be an asterisk within history books for all time after that, but it is just important to note that the Empire, or rather, the Luthanen is seeking additional allies and support for the actions in the east, and are seeking recruits and volunteers from all flying operational units anywhere within the enjoined range of communication. So if you are aware of and can access any flying support, be sure to guide them towards joining the army of the Luthanen and standing against the tyranny of the Empire and its supporters, the Priest Kings. All right, now we're going to be switching our direction to speaking about the Strangers in a Strange Land. This is our Monday campaign, and these individuals had been moving eastward with the intent of moving up the pass and into the area of the claimed stairway to hell and the ascent into heaven. The descent into heaven and the ascent into hell. So this is a rather challenging portion of the adventure, and in order to not be captured or caught in an ambush, instead the group made their way across the wildlands south of Olmera, and had discovered what appeared to be, according to their understanding, a nerf graveyard, although the signs and recommendations that the nerfs had buried themselves in such a fashion as to question whether or not they were natural beings or if they had been manipulated, as they were uniformly spaced across a large field. Numbers were not completely specified, but it appeared to be more than 122 of the encasements were discovered, and after a considerable amount of investigation, it was indeed determined that there is a now correlation between the nerf population and the Priest King / Yarlim / Ixal populations thereafter. And although there is a lot of research that still needs to be done, it does appear that at least one of the more dangerous of these beings, known as the Ixal, was, I guess you would say, invigorated or revitalized and brought into sentience, and the effect was fundamentally devastating, causing the adventuring group to lose more than 3 hours of their day to a blackout period. And fortunately, one of the players, Korvax, did establish a time loop and passed backwards and was able to verify that the creature that did depart seemed to do so in somewhat of a sedate and perhaps zombified form, and simply walked north out of their camp. Since they had lost 3 hours, there would be a considerable amount of time to capture the beast, and it was nearing dark, and so they considered their options. Now, this correlation did cause them to pause and consider all of the details they had, and found that there is an orientation issue, that these nerf capsules were actually intentionally presented in such a fashion as to affect the speciation format of the progeny that would climb out of those cells eventually. And from that, they determined that the very orientation of the containers caused a definitional change between the species, therefore creating not Yarlum as expected, but the dreaded Ixal instead. And so this has given them a considerable amount of information about what is going on and how to prevent the advancement of the Ixal. After some time, they made a consideration of whether they should remain in the scene in terms of dealing with the destruction of the fundamental Ixal nursery, or if they were instead going to make sure to pursue the individual to find out where it went. After the realization they do within their numbers have a flying unit that can pursue and attempt to maintain communication or at least interaction with the zombified Ixal, they determined to instead dedicate the entire evening and afternoon to digging up and destroying all of the individual cells of this particular nest so that no Ixal can procreate from this location. What this therefore led to is the challenge that they had to make, and while it was very well argued on both sides to do both actions, they determined that it was better to do them sequentially, and so they have stayed long enough to verify not only the destruction of the general pod locations, if you will, for the actual larvae of the Ixal, but more importantly to exhume, study, and then destroy that of the apparent brain bug, the being that had been modified and altered to cause them to deposit their cells in this particular configuration, and ensure that therefore there was no replication of that process possible, and fundamentally in a mute way to actually stand silent and watch the destruction of the potential bodies of their enemies, although these were not one of them was verified to actually be of the Yarlum breed, and therefore do not add to their destructive count against the Legion. Nonetheless, the capacity for them to have additional bodies has therefore now been restricted. The final group that we're speaking of have gone under many names. They have been the Skiffborn, they have been the Dreamstriders, but at this point, as their vessel now is being powered by one of the items of power, the pieces of the prism, as it were, they are now being defined as the Prism-born. And with their function to this time, they actually utilized their chronomantic function and risked it all, if you will, on a single die roll to determine their timeline. That is to say, they chose to attempt to use one of the prismatic devices to enhance their mystical ability to cover great distances in an instant, which would have therefore breached their time restraints and possibly flung them into the deep recesses of the chronomatic field of Nycos. That is, they could have sent them back to any one of the previous iterations, or even heaven forfend into a future iteration, and therefore remove that entire group of characters from this storyline altogether. As fortune would have it, they did roll a wild success, and therefore have succeeded in achieving the impossible. That is, covering the distance from the areas just north of Selk to the orange, then tangerine ziggurat just off the coast of Nexus. So in order to show you that great distance, let me return to the reminder map for a second. So the players had just recently recovered one of the items of power and encapsulated one of the daemon at the Amber Ziggurat, and were visiting the village near Selk. And while they were in the area of Selk, it was determined that the pathway was taking too long. They spent almost 2 weeks passing through the areas of Candle's Keep and the area of the Kingdom of Kells, and had actually approached the Barbus borders in order to make their trek across the open oceans. And as they endeavored to cross that space, it again took them more than 2 weeks of adventures and encounters and dangers before they finally approached the coastline of Growlin. And as they approached the area of Growlin near this bay, they determined that they wanted to instead use their time more wisely by risking it all on the vessel, the Prism-born vessel they're using. And they traveled not from that location across the entire continent of Growlin to arrive at the Tangerine Ziggurat or its environs instantaneously. And so a trek of more than 40 days of travel they were able to do instantaneously for the first time ever. And by pure happenstance and a really good die roll, the strangers in a strange land, no, I'm getting it wrong, the Prism-born made their way to the Tangerine Ziggurat. And that is where they are currently. So let's go back to our conversation. So having made their way to this, what was then the Tangerine Ziggurat, they endeavored to reopen the device, which they had themselves locked, and the locking process was actually visited upon the location, not only by any of the players in the group, but somebody who had been with them previously. And so they had to fundamentally discover where he had hidden the locking mechanism so that they could re-enter the ziggurat. So they endeavored to search the island, and after many hours they finally did discover it, and were able to reactivate the artifact. On the one note, the ziggurat itself did emanate its color and its identity as being alive with their arrival, and they passed within. As they went beneath, they discovered they had to talk with the Mord, a group of beings apparently from Penumbra, who were tasked for the past iteration with guarding whatever being was placed within the ziggurat as its imprisonment. And the players had to re-establish the conversation with the Mord and provide a new deal. In the past iteration, the deal was established and paid for with the actual sacrifice of 2 persona, and that was literally at the end of the iteration, wherein the players had achieved their goals within the game and deemed it worthy for them to use this as the ending of their story within the game. But none of these players at this point were, of course, willing to make that establishment, as they felt they had much more to do, much more to accomplish, and so a new deal was struck. And I will be including in our Discord channel for your awareness the items that were particularly paid for this fundamental sacrifice, which of course will become important later in the story. But for your understanding, you can gain this information by becoming a member of our Patreon program, and as you do that, you'll receive access to the Discord channel, and all of the notes that are going on for our games are within those channels, so you can keep track of what's going on within each of the sessions directly, as well as gives you more insight to these updates that we do each week. Having said that, so, once they had established this agreement, the Prism-born then returned to their vessel and brought down the triune pyramid, the very device that they had previously captured the daemon known as Xylans, and brought it here with the understanding and the awareness that the orange ziggurat is to be the imprisonment location for Xylans. And with the agreement made with the Mord, they now then reestablish his location by securing the mirror into proper location to allow its spirit to be invoked into the ziggurat, and at the same time the mirror would then capture the entity known as Baphomet that had been wrongfully imprisoned here. So with a few tense moments, soon the mirror actually fundamentally looked back, and a great roar was heard as Baphomet was stymied. He had anticipated he would be being released instead of being recaptured, and so he was not very pleased with the fact that they had captured him within this mystical mirror. And so they fundamentally have now imprisoned an actual extraplanetary, extra-system demon within the device, and have reestablished the orange ziggurat's true location, true color, and true power. And therefore, one of their missions has been accomplished. Now, this cause for celebration was fundamentally short-lived, because as they were loading out from the island, returning the mirror to its placement on their Prism-born vessel, they did take note of an arriving vessel of massive size, some form of sea hulk, if you will, many various vessels lashed together to create a buoyant mass that was on its way inward, and therefore the party is on their vessel, considering what their course of action will be. Now they have established the release of two of the daemon release of two spirits from the ziggurats, imprisoning one of the proper ones in its space, and at the same time getting rid of or eliminating one of the false ziggurats, leaving them therefore only 6. So fundamentally they are 2 down of 4 with 5 yet to go. It's fun math, isn't it? All right, so we are at the end of the 9 news nuggets you need to know, 3 points from each of the storylines. If you want to know more, check out nycosrpg.com, which is the site for myself as well as the events that I run. And if you want more information on Nycos RPG, I will be putting a link down below on how to purchase it. And of course, if you want any and all information, you go to the Play Now portion of nycosrpg.com and you can download the fast play version of Nycos RPG from the master book, as well as player persona information, the community identity sheet used for GM production of new adventures, and more. So check that out, and I will see you in the next video. Do remember that we are here Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. and generally 11 p.m. Pacific time, and we will see you in the next session.